Questions fill our mind all the time. Questions fill our minds all the time. Regrets, concerns, mental battles, they all come. Why? Because life is real. Life is real. And we all know that, right? We all have been down those roads at points in times. We began again this brand new teaching series today that I really believe the Lord has impressed upon my heart because of different things that have come to me over the last several weeks and different comments that I've heard made by some that I know, some that I just get reached out to. Have I gone too far? Have I really, really messed up beyond the point of repair? Now, this is not a setup. I want you to understand this question, have I gone too far? It's not a setup to see, well, how much further can I go? That's not the point. That's not the point of seeing, well, am I at that level or can I get a little bit more out of this? No, but rather, here's what the point of it is. It is to settle the question, can I come back? Because oftentimes if we think we've gone too far, we settle with the idea that I can't fix it. I can't come back. I can't resolve this thing that has been broken. I want us to examine over the next several weeks together a few familiar stories, but I want us to look at them through our own eyes. You know, oftentimes when we can, in a great story, you're able to relate to the character, right? You're able to find yourself in the confines of that story, even whether it's a movie or whether it's a written story, novel, whatever. You're able to walk through some of these journeys with the characters because they identify with something you've been through or something that you're struggling with. Bible stories are absolutely no different when we begin to understand the context of how they are written. Over the years, I have heard this statement, God couldn't love me. I've done too much. I've gone too far. But I want to ask you this question. I've gone too far. Where is that? Where is that location? Where does too far? Where is that? Where does that reside? Where is that found on the map, if you will? Turn with me today to Luke chapter 15. As we begin our text, we begin to understand this story. And one might say, well, I've heard this story of the prodigal son. There have been 1,000 sermons, 1,000,000 sermons. I get it. But we're going to tell it today different. We're going to look at it today completely different because this story, again, the lessons, the teachings, the Bible studies, there's too many to count how many there are. But I absolutely believe there's room for one more. And we're going to take a new spin on this one today, and we're going to look at something that I'm hoping that maybe you've never considered as we look at these very familiar words, how we've heard them before. And we know how it goes, right? We know the concept of the story, and we understand all of that. But I want us to consider the personal aspect of this. What does it tell us? What is the message here, if you will? What does it say to the one? What does it say to the one who is struggling, whether they still have a chance or not? What does it say, and how do we get to the place that led us away? How did we get there? Because every journey has a beginning, right? And so if I'm at this place, how did I get there? What steps took me there? How did we begin, if you will? So we start this story, and we find the answer right from the very beginning. How did we get there? How did we get to that place? We start the story, the seed, if you will, of where it all starts. So we read as Jesus is telling this, he says, a man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, give me. Everything starts right there. Give me. That's where it begins. The expectation, if you will, of what we believe we deserve. Have you ever felt that way? Or maybe you've ever heard somebody, give me what I deserve. Give me what I want. We kind of build societies on that ideology, right? We see dynasties and all kinds of stuff. Give it to me. It's mine. I deserve it. And there's television commercials. It's mine. I want it now. All these things. We build it on that concept. So we see this, give me. The expectation of what we deserve or have earned, or in some cases demand, This is where the door opens for the next steps. Give me. Now, in our story for today, this is speaking of an inheritance. It's mine. It's mine. It's going to happen. I'm going to get it anyhow at some point in time later, but I want it now. I don't want to wait. I don't want to wait. I want to use it now. I'm ready to go. I got a plan. I got it all figured out. So give it to me right now. How many of us have ever been in a hurry? We don't want to wait. We want it right now. We don't want to wait on anything. We don't want to wait for it to percolate. We don't want to wait for it to get finished cooking. We're ready. You know, you've heard my illustration before, you know, even in the microwave, you know, we're holding on to the handle because we can't get done quick enough. We're always in a hurry. Sometimes we don't want to wait. And every one of us have been in that, regardless of the situation, whether it's work, whether there's personal stuff, traffic, we all want it to happen quicker. We all do. We all do. But it's in those moments sometimes when we're trying to expedite things, when we're trying to rush things, if we're honest, we don't always make the best choices, do we? Because I'm ready to get it done. I want it now. Only to look back later and say, man, I could have done that a little bit better. Maybe that would have worked better if I had waited 5 more minutes, you know? We see that all the time, like in traffic. I'm going now. Pull out, crash. But if you'd have waited 30 seconds, you'd have avoided that. It wouldn't have happened. I was coming here to the office the other day, and a person, you know, go around on the side instead of waiting for the lane to open up. They're going to drive down the grass and the gravel and the dirt, you know, because they got to get around everybody. But what happened? They were in a lower car. They hit a hole and they got stuck there. So they caused more delay, actually trying to get in a hurry. Sometimes when we're in a hurry, we don't always make the best choices. So we read here, the son said, give me, and the father did. He did. He gave it to him. And then we see in verse 13, it begins, not many days later. So he's off and running. He got what he wanted, and now he's off to the races. He's off and running. And his plans are in place. Man, I got my pockets full. I got all my plans, my great ideas. I'm going to take over the world. I got it. I got it all figured out. You just watch me. You just watch me. But here's what's interesting. In the very same verse, in this very same verse 13, it begins, not many days later, the younger son had gathered together all that he had, and he traveled to a distant country where he squandered. Now that's in the same verse. Okay? He got it and he threw it away. How easy is that to happen? Okay? So we're not picking on him. We're looking at this logically. We're looking at, hey, wait a minute. That could be me. Think about it. It says he squandered. Now, when we look at that word, we think of the sayings and statements, maybe, if you will. Oh, boy, that wasn't what I expected. That was actually a lot harder than I thought. I'm talking to the 19-year-old me. That was really, really a lot harder than I thought. I really didn't have it figured out. I mean, how could, because look at the situation. I want us to look at the situation that is here. Give me my part. I want it now. But it didn't last. It didn't last. Why? Why? Or how was it squandered? Again, in the same verse, we see, not many days later, the younger son gathered together all that he had and traveled to a district where he squandered his estate in foolish living. Foolish living. We see not good choices being made. I've got everything here, but man, and never realizing the more it goes out and you don't put anything back, it kind of creates a mess, right? All right, so we begin to paint this picture. We begin to see, well, wait a minute, this story actually makes a whole lot more sense because this is not about just a rebellious guy that just wants to go have his way. It's exactly how it happens if we don't plan things the right way. How do we get ourselves there? We begin with the two words, give me, because we've decided what everything that we need. And so we see that he squandered this with foolish living. And verse 14 begins, after he spent everything. Okay, so he's going through it, man, like a hot knife through butter, right? It's all going, and it's going away quick. And it says he spent everything, and then a severe famine struck that country, and he had nothing. So all the resources that I had is gone. My surroundings have nothing to offer me either because now everybody's in famine. So, boy, oh boy, we got a mess. We got a mess. Squandered, foolish living. It all begins to tie together. But what is the dilemma? It says that he has spent everything and now he had nothing. Okay? So what is the thought process? So what is the dilemma? Man, I have really blown it. I have really, really messed up. That is not only everything I had, but it's everything I had coming. Because remember, this was his inheritance. It's all gone. Everything's gone. I have really, really spent it all, and I've thrown it away. What have I done? What have I done? I mean, I truly thought this was it. I truly thought I had it all figured out. I truly thought I had a plan. I mean, I had it. I was ready. Do we see the pattern? Do we see how we could get to that place really, really easy? Do we see how this works out? Do we see the pattern? Do we see how easy it is to get there? This is not about picking on this kid. It's not about picking on this kid at all. It is about seeing, wait a minute, that sounds awful familiar. This story is about looking in the mirror, friends. This story is about understanding what is being said here. This is about realizing how this story happens over and over and over, and how many it has been the same, how many it has happened to over and over, and how many of us in this very room, it could be us in this story. It could be someone that we know. It could be a sibling. It could be a good friend. It could be one of us. It could be one of our children. I want it now. Give me everything I have coming to me right now. I'm going to go do it my way. We could see it happening really, really easy. I get it. I get it. And then I throw it away. And I have nothing to show for it. Does that sound like a familiar story? That's kind of life, isn't it? It's the way we see it happen in so many places when there's no guidance there, when there's no teaching there, when there's just go do it and find out. That doesn't always work, okay? But there's something beautiful about this. There's something about how this comes full circle, because the question does come back to, what now? It says he had nothing, right? It said he had nothing, and the famine was around them. He had nothing. He had spent it all. Everything was gone. So here comes the question. Have I gone too far? Have I really messed up? Is there any fix to this? Is it over? I hear this all the time. I hear this all the time. I am overwhelmed by it lately, by how many people are in that mindset. Many absolutely believe that the end of the road has come. The end of the road has come and there is no answer. I've gone too far. I've messed up and I don't have any answer. I can't fix this. And it just goes on and it becomes a cycle. It becomes a problem. Verse 14 says, he had nothing. But that was speaking of material items. Okay, but here's what I want you to understand. This also speaks to this moment that he believed he had access to nothing. It wasn't that he just didn't have anything physically, tangibly with anymore. That was all gone. But at that point, he didn't think he had access to anything else. So in a way, he gave up. How easy is that to do? When we don't see the immediate answer right in front of us, and we've determined, I've messed up too much, there's no answer, there's no hope, so what do? You quit. You give up. It's a very easy place to get. This is not difficult. And it's not picking on the kid in the story. This is why understanding the value, and this is speaking to the believer, this is why understanding the value of what we offer is so important. You see, friends, Jesus offers hope to the hopeless. Jesus offers peace to those in the storm. But how he is introduced is the key that opens the door or keeps it locked. That's important that we understand that. Because you see, this young man says, I have nothing and I have nothing to look for. But was that true? No. No. Is that true to anybody today? No. Okay, have I gone too far? No. But you got to know how to open the door. And that comes to us. What do we present? What is the important message of what we do? Why do we do it? So we go on with the story. This young man had nothing, therefore he sought nothing. See, if we don't share hope, if we don't share the understanding of who God is and what this means and why we do this, why would anybody look? I don't have anything. Life sucks. Everything's terrible. This is bad. My job's bad. This is bad. So I just quit. How easy is it to get there? It's a very easy place, right? So if we don't see that there is something beyond that, why would we look for it? That's why Jesus said, go forth and be light unto the world. Go forth and be salt unto the earth. That's why this is so important. So we read that he went to work feeding the pigs. Now let me ask you a question. Have you ever been around a hog pen? That's not a very nice place. It's not a nice place at all, right? Okay, it's just a fact, all right? But it said that's where he got a job. Have you ever seen hog slop? That's even more unpleasant than the hog pen. It's just not a good thing at all. Yet here, what we read, now think about this. He has nothing. He's looking for nothing. He's completely out of it. And yet still we read here, he is so low. This is where he's at, friends, that he was in such a place. It tells us in verse 15 that he got the job. And then verse 16, read this. He longed, that means desired, to eat his fill. That means, we're talking golden corral here. All you can stand, right? All you can get from the pods that the pigs were eating. But no one would give him anything. So wait a minute. He was in such a low place. He was in such a vile place that he longed, he desired to eat from what the hogs were eating. We don't want to picture being in such a place of hopelessness. But many people are saying anything's better than nothing because they don't look for anything better. Because no one's shown them anything better. They don't understand that there is something so much greater before us that we just don't see it, but it is about the presentation. So we see that he longed to eat his fill from the pods of the pigs, but no one would give him anything. See, friends, he's not at the bottom of the barrel. He's under it. I mean, he's not in a good place at all. I've lost everything. I'm ashamed. I'm embarrassed. I'm hungry. I'm sad. I've ruined everything. I have nothing. I have no reason to go on. That's a real place. That's a real place that many, many people today are surrounded by. We're surrounded by people in that place. I have no reason to go on. I have no reason to continue. Why? Because nobody's told them there was anything better. Okay, this goes back to understanding how this all comes to be. So we read in this same verse, verse 17, when he came to his senses, wait a minute. It was that pause moment. It was that, hold on just a minute. There is one more option. It's coming to me now in the midst of all of this chaos, in the midst of this lowness, in the midst of this muck and mire, literally. There's one more thing. Yeah, it's a big, giant pill to have to swallow, but I can go home. I can go home. My Father's workers, they are cared for. I'll go do that. I'll go do that. I'll get up and I'll go to my Father. Now, we read that, and we may initially think, well, wait a minute, that's an act of desperation. That's an act of desperation. But look at what we're actually seeing. This is where this starts to get really beautiful and powerful. This is what we're actually seeing. The relationship that had been established between the Father and his Son never said and never gave the impression, you can't come back. That's important. That's important. This is the story that Jesus is telling. It's not just for kicks and giggles. It's not just a cool Bible story. He's saying, I want you to listen to what I'm telling you. You got what you wanted and you walked away. And you threw it all away. And you really blew it. But guess what? You can still come home. Nothing in this story says that that relationship had ever been severed. It had not been broken. The heart of this father had absolutely been broken by his son's choices, but he remained his son. Okay? That's the beauty of this. Okay? Many of us have walked down that pathway. I don't know if any of you have ever disappointed your parents, but if you live long enough, you will. You know, that's the fact of life. And our children are going to disappoint us. That's going to happen. Does it mean that it's easy to deal with? No. Does it still hurt? Absolutely. But do they ever stop being our children? No. No. This is the beauty of what God is trying to get us to see here. He remained his son. The brokenness of the son caused him to forget that, though. I've gone too far. I've messed up too much. I have nothing. And it caused him to believe that. It caused him to believe that he had gone too far. And the most important door of his life was now closed. He was convinced that this was true. He was convinced that this was real. And this is how many of us know, maybe it's been us. Maybe it's someone that we know that feels that way about God. I've messed up too much. I can't possibly, God would never have anything to do with me. Look at me. I've done this, I've done that. I've been to jail. I've whatever. I've, been married 40 times. All these, which if you've been married 40 times, it might be you. But that's a whole different story. But all these different things that are going on. How many people feel that way? I can't possibly even consider the idea that God would want anything to do with me. A lot of people wrestle with that. It is beyond repair. I'm beyond repair. I went too far. I'm not worthy. This young man, he said, I'll get up and go to my father and say, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Just let me work here. Just let me work here so I can have something to eat. Just let me work here so I can try to survive. This is how real life gets sometimes. This is where life takes us to sometimes when there is no hope. When there is no hope, we stop looking for it. That's just true. When we think it's all gone. We have the phrase in our Western culture, all hope is lost. Is that ever true? No. But we can be convinced of that very, very easily. So he says here, I'm just not going to quit looking. But again, this is to everyone here. This is to everyone listening. What we present, who we present, and how we represent matters. Okay? This is important for all that are listening and all that see. See, people all around us are the young man from this story. I am not worthy. I am not worthy. But yet still, they've not been told the Father who loves them beyond words. They've not heard this. They've only heard all the awful stuff. They've only heard all about the damnation and the judgment and how they don't stand a chance because of all the mistakes that they made. But then we read something really different in this story that doesn't match up with that. We see something in this story that tells us an entirely different concept, an entirely different side of how this looked. And it goes on, and in verse 20, it says, so he got up and he went to his father. This is so important. It says he got up. This is the son. And he went to his father. He's on the way. His spirit is crushed. He's beyond humble. He's broken. He's defeated because he has, according to the story and according to the understanding, he has nothing left. But here's what I love. Think about this. This is what it says, verse 20. And it says, he got up and he went to his father. But while but while the son was still a long way off. So in other words, he wasn't quite there. He had not yet arrived. He's still in the fight. He's still working on it. This is the picture that we see painting. But while he's on the way, listen to this, the Father saw him. Our Father sees us. He sees the struggle. He sees the work that we're doing to try to get there, whether it's walking or crawling or running. He sees this, friends. What he's saying is don't quit. If you don't quit, God won't quit. You've heard me say that 1,000 times. It says here, the Father saw him and was filled with compassion. And he ran and he threw his arms around his neck and he kissed him. Was that what the Son expected? No. Nowhere close. He had already said, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. I don't even deserve to be called your son. I am gone too far. But did the Father see it that way? No. Does the Father see it that way with any of us? No. The story is incredible. It's so powerful because here we see not only the powerful picture that Jesus is painting with his words, we see that picture being painted for everyone who is struggling, for everyone who has struggled, for everyone who is struggling, for everyone who will struggle. We need to hear this. We need to hear this. And so we see that the Father, he saw him coming and he had filled with compassion and he ran out and he put his arms around him and hugged him and kissed him. And it says in verse 21, the Son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight I am no longer worthy to be called your son. So he delivered his message. He'd already got himself worked up about it in his heart. He already knew what he was going to say and it had to come out because that's how he felt. Because why? He had nothing, because he believed that he had nothing, but even worse, he believed he was nothing. How many people struggle with that today? A lot of people really don't see self-value because the world has beaten them to death. You know, your credit score is not good enough, and this is not good enough, and your big bank account's not big enough, and you got a raggedy car. And we see society always doing that. And many people fall into that category, and they stay there, and they don't see beyond. And so the Son delivered his message. But the Father told his servants, verse 22, quick, bring out the best robe. Put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. So he says, bring out the best. Bring out the best. Get these things. Get the fatted calf on the grill, man. It is time to celebrate. Wow. But wait a minute. Wasn't the Father supposed to curse him out? Wasn't he supposed to tell him he's a loser? Wasn't he supposed to make him grovel for a bone? Wasn't he supposed to kick him just a little bit more to make him earn his way back? Isn't that how it works? Isn't that the way it's supposed to be? Isn't that how God treats us? No, it's not. That's not how it works at all. Let me ask you this, friends. Would that have helped? Let's put ourselves into that scenario. Put yourself there. Would that restore? Or would that possibly break things beyond repair? I want us to think about this because this is important. This really spoke to my heart. You know, not only as a parent, but as one trying to show people that there's something better. This boy already knew what he had done. He didn't need reminding. That wasn't going to help. One thing, he knew his failure. He knew his disgrace. He knew that his spirit was crushed. Did it need more crushing or did it need lifting up? Which one's going to fix it? Which one's going to make it better? You know, if you go into the mechanic shop with a flat tire, they don't need to tell you it's flat. You need air, right? You don't have to give me the obvious. I know I messed up. I don't need you to browbeat me about that. You know, but that's what we do, right? But that's not what God does. It says here, bring the best out here because mine that was lost is found. Mine that was dead is now alive. They came back home. What we need to understand is we have the ability to do that. If you've done something wrong, and we all have at some point in time, do you need reminding or do you need restoration? I'm not talking about excusing the wrong. Wrong is wrong and wrong will always be wrong, okay? We're not making any excuses. But that's already known. In order to fix that, it requires a willingness to get beyond it. You can't keep living there. I said this morning, if you keep carrying those bricks, the only thing you're going to build is the same old house. You got to get past that. You got to move to the next place. And that's what this Father is showing us. And that is exactly how God's approach to us is. If you are in the hog pen today, or if you know somebody who is, rise and go to your Father. What did this Father feel? He said, this son of mine was dead. Now that's important because here that word is referencing he had stopped living. Didn't mean he wasn't still alive because obviously he was breathing and talking, but he had stopped living, which means he had no hope. He had given up. He had quit. He no longer sought for better. He says he was dead and is alive again. He came back to me. He came back home. He was lost. He had no idea where he was going, and now he is found. He came home. John Newton would use that concept to write the words, I once was lost, but now am found, was blind, but now I see. Isn't God's grace amazing? When we understand the beauty of the concept of the stories that Jesus told, friends, they're about life. They're about Him talking to us. This is God's love letter to us. This is God saying, listen, I know everything, but we can make it right. It doesn't fix things that there's a consequence and there's a repair and there's this and that. The water pipe's still leaking. We got to get some Flex Seal for it. But we can fix it. We can get there. Can we see the joy of this Father's heart? Look at this. It says his son, his very one who had left, who had gave up on life, is alive again. He's back. It wasn't a focus on what he did wrong. That wasn't the part of the conversation. It wasn't a focus on what he had failed at. It was, my son is home. That was it. That was what this whole story is about. That's all that mattered at that very moment. I'm going to share this story with you. A friend of mine sent this to me this week. I'm going to try my best to read it. So bear with me for a minute. A pastor outside of Chicago had a son whose life had spiraled out of control due to addiction. He had estranged from the family and they had not heard from him in years. One Sunday morning around 2 a.m., the pastor's phone rang. The caller claimed to be from the police department saying he had picked up their son for a DUI and they needed him to come pick him up. The pastor got dressed and he got to his car and he drove to the local police station. But when he arrived, they told him they had no idea what he was talking about. They had no record of his son. They had no idea where he might be. The dad began to drive to the neighboring towns, to all the different local municipalities and police precincts, only to get the same response. He exhausted all of his options and he decided to look through his old book, and he found the last known address that he had for where his son might have been. And it was a flop house in downtown Chicago. If you've ever been to Chicago, that's not necessarily the safest place in the world in these places. The pastor arrived and the front door was open on the raggedy old house. He began to walk through. The people passed out all over the ground. Needles and all different things all over the place. Couches, chairs, and floors. He made his way through the house, only finding more just detriment as he walked through. And he got to the back bedroom. And there he found his son, passed out on a mattress. He stood there for a moment to get himself composed, and he knelt down and he kissed his son on the cheek and quietly left. 2 weeks later, the son unexpectedly showed up. He stayed for a while, and then he left, and he stayed for a while, and ultimately reintegrated with the family. Months later, his dad asked him, he said, son, I got to talk to you. He said, what caused you to come home? What caused you to return? What changed? And his son began to smile and says, do you remember, Dad, that late night phone call you got about the police department had picked me up? And he said, yeah. How did you know about that? The son replies, well, it wasn't the police that called you. It was one of my friends. We thought it would be funny to make you run all over town searching for me when we knew you had to preach the next morning. So I'm ashamed to tell you that. But he goes on and he says, but the last thing that I expected was for you to actually come look for me. I saw you pull up. There was nobody asleep in the house. We all pretended. And I heard you walk into my room and my whole body was tensed because I didn't know what was going to be said. I expected you to kick me. I expected you to yell at me and curse at me. But you kissed me. The son goes on to tell his dad, he said, it's the goodness of God that leads us to repentance. The changes in the heart are caused by kisses and not kicks. That's this story. That's this story. That's what this whole illustration from Jesus is all about, is getting us to see, friends, you can come home. That's this story. That's what it's all about. Have I gone too far? No. We see there's a celebration going on here, but then in verse 25, we see another door open. That's all has had. And he says, so they began to celebrate in verse 24 because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. And he was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. And then verse 25 says, now his older son was in the field. And as he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So the older brother now enters from the field. And he's basically saying, what's going on? I mean, man, there's like a big party happening and all this music and what is going on? And the servant says, your brother has returned and your father is celebrating. But we read he became angry at that. He became angry that his younger brother had come back. You see, friends, the younger brother, we call him the prodigal son, right? That's the story, right? But I want you to hear this. There's two. What? I never read that before. The younger son was prodigal, which simply means separated by his foolish living. He had gone this way because of where. But here we find the older brother also becoming prodigal, being separated due to his unforgiving heart. Does that keep us separated from one another as well? You did this, you did that. Man, I'm never getting over that. And it keeps that barrier there. It keeps a real issue there that doesn't allow for restoration. It doesn't allow for healing. It doesn't allow for anything. That's a problem. So we see two different components here of being prodigal. So we read that he was angry. It says he didn't even want to go in. I don't want nothing to do with it. Man, he went out and messed up everything and threw away all of his stuff and running around with all this stuff. I don't want anything to do with it. I am not going to rejoice at his return. And so he saw it as undeserved. This was his focus. This was his focus. Why? Because he was reflecting on the dead part of his brother, the part that had no life, the part that had lost life, the part that had stopped living, and he was willing to leave him there. Now, here's the question. Is that an easy place to get to? Let's be honest. Is that an easy place to get to when we don't understand the heart of the Father? Absolutely. You are undeserving. You did this and you got what you deserve. You did this and you got, that's, you put yourself there. It's an easy place to get. I worked in that world for 13 years. You know, you did, do the crime, do the time, right? It's an easy place to get to. It's a very, very easy place to get to. He said, look, man, I've been working here all these years. I've been doing this. I've been working really hard. I do everything you asked me to, and I've never got anything. I never got a celebration. I mean, you killed the fatted calf and had a big, celebration for him. I didn't even get a goat. I didn't get nothing. Is that a normal response? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's a very easy place to go when we feel underappreciated while at the same time watching somebody else get over. We can get there. It's an easy place to get to. Again, we're not justifying anything. That's real. That's why it's so important to understand the reality of how this story plays out on both ends. We can see how easy it is to be young and foolish and throw everything away, or be old and foolish and throw everything away. I mean, you don't have to have an age limit on being an idiot. Okay, there's no age barrier on that. We've all done it. I know some that have done it at 15. I know some that have done it at 60. I mean, that doesn't change anything. But here's what we find. It's a very easy place to hold on to that. It's a very easy place to get and stay there when we don't feel like we were appreciated for what we offered. But here is where we find the Father. He gives words back that answer so many things. And I love this, all right? He replied to his father, "Look, I've been slaving many years for you, and I have never disobeyed your orders, and you never gave me anything," all right? That's what he's saying. But when this son of yours came back, he's not even considering him as his brother at this point. He's saying, this son of yours. He's not even acknowledging a relationship here at all, right? He said when he came back, man, he gets everything. But look at verse 31. The father begins his conversation with the word son. He's still speaking to him. Son. That's very important because the personal nature of not just words, but the connection. You're still my son. Okay? You're on the outside of things at this very moment because of your attitude, but you're still my son. And I love that this relationship has value because he says to him, he says, "Son, you have always been with me. You have always been with me, and everything that I have is yours. Everything that I have is yours." In other words, I've never lost you. Think about what he's saying here. I've never lost you. And I love that. I love that. But your brother that I also love, he wasn't just lost. He was dead. Look at the power of these words, friends. He was not just lost, but he was dead. In other words, it wasn't for certain that he was going to come back. I didn't know. I had no idea if I'd ever see him again. If you've ever experienced that in life, a brokenness in a relationship, and most particularly a family, and you never know if you're going to see them again, and it's due to hardness of heart, or it's due to unforgiveness, or it's due to, all these different things, or due because a relationship has not been painted that it is repairable, that one thinks, I can't go home. That's a hard place to be. I've seen it. I've seen families destroyed over the years because of these very things. People's lives completely just wrecked and ruined over this stuff. And so this father is trying to explain, this is why I did what I did. I wasn't sure he would come back. My heart was broken at the thought that I would never see my son again. And so in verse 32, so he says, so we had to celebrate. We had to rejoice. Had to. That's important. Why? Because it was worthy of celebrating. I couldn't overlook that. I couldn't get past that. We are celebrating because this one that was lost is now recovered. This one that was broken is now one who had given up, one who was defeated. They really thought they had messed up beyond repair. They came back. They were dead, and now they are alive again. We can hear the passion of this father's heart. We can see the message that God has for us because that's how he feels about each and every one of us. Sometimes we think, man, I done really, really blew it. I've gone down the wrong road and all I can see is dead end signs and there's no exit, there's nothing. God allows U-turns. I want you to know that this morning. And that's the beautiful part of this story because this is exactly how God sees us. If you've strayed, if you're dead, or if you know somebody who is, I want you to hear this. You have not gone too far. The young man in this story that Jesus tells, it represents more than, as I said earlier, just a cool Bible story that's told over and over and over ad nauseum. It's important because it represents us. This is God's message to us. Come home. Arise out of your hog pen and come to your Father. See, because friends, this could be any of us. This could be any of us. Not one of us is exempt. Maybe Rosa. But none of us are exempt. We could all end up in the hog pen. We could all be there. But even more so. And here's where it gets hard, and we're wrapping up. We're saying, well, yeah, that'd be an easy place to get pastor. I could mess up a lot. I could end up in the hog pen. But we could also be his brother and not willing to be open that door. We could also be the other prodigal and not willing to open that door. But friends, we have a Father who will love us. We have a Father who will not let us go. Isn't that awesome? Isn't that incredible? I truly hope with all my heart you will never read this story the same again, that you will look at it forever differently.